invited to talk about action, and I think it's a very interesting topic. I did political science and economics for 6 years, and then I did my PhD for 8 years. So I've spent a lot of time at universities, at least formally. But still, I turned a bit to action over the last 2 to 3 years. So maybe it's interesting from that perspective, how can you come from thinking and words to action? And today will not only be action, but it will be talk and some thoughts and some social science theory as well. When you came in, I went to my computer and checked the news, and I think it's a time where we need a lot more and better action than we have today. 70 people have died in Austria in a lorry, so it's not 50, it's 70. 250 people have died in Libya, in the Mediterranean, and still there's no real policy action. How can we get people safely from Syria to here? There's no action. There's action here welcoming people, but there's no action on the larger scale because we're stuck on this problem. I don't see any big political effort to get this going. Which brings me to the topic of my talk, because I want to talk about persuasion through action. Why talk about persuasion? People don't think alike. Like the people in this room, I think we share a lot of perspectives and a lot of thoughts, and most of us think that's reasonable and we're well informed, etc. But people out there think very differently, and people have very different opinions, and they're very, very stubborn. People are very attached to their opinions, and persuading them is not easy because people don't want to be persuaded. And I'll come to that in a second. So the normal way that we go about persuasion is arguments, facts, numbers, maybe some stories, and we give them to people, and we think, okay, if they hear the numbers, they will change their mind. I'm very confident that often this is not the right way to persuasion. That arguments and data and numbers and all that we can bring up to persuade people, it's not going to work. There are countless examples of stubbornness to persuasion that took decades or centuries. Gun laws in the United States. It seems like very rational to us that we should change gun laws in the United States, but there's a very stubborn, very broad coalition against changing gun laws. Gay marriage in Germany. I don't see there's any real argument against gay marriage, right? But we have a sizable proportion of the population who's still against this, and we have a major party who's against this, so it's not coming. Luckily, irrationality is often systematic. So it's not that people are just randomly stubborn, but they're predictably stubborn. And we can understand why they resist persuasion. And that is, I think, where we can unlock persuasion. So let's look at a bit of theory, because theory helps us to systematically understand why people are stubborn. And I have dug out 4 things from social psychology theory. So it's how do people think, but how do people think in a connected way, because we're not individuals isolated, but we're connected to others and influenced. So the first one is called confirmation bias. So when people search for information, when they store information, which we call memory, and when they process information, they tend to select things that confirm their worldview. If you take organic farming, people who don't like organic farming, they will remember the story that was published 10 years ago about some toxins in organic eggs, right? So it's a complete random story. It's 10 years old. It may have been true or not, but they remember the story, and this is what they put to the front, right? Or people that don't like refugees, they'll pick some random story, some random picture, and this will blow up, and it will dominate their whole perception, because they search for facts, data, and numbers that confirm their worldviews. It's very well documented. There was a very nice picture that circulated of a devastated refugee camp, like you see the refugee camp, and there's cardboards lying around, and it's the refugees just left, and look what a mess they made. The problem is the picture is from the Prague embassy when Eastern Germans were fleeing to the Prague embassy and then leaving. And that's how places look when people leave and when they're refugees, right? Because they may not take every piece of cupboard, they're just happy to get out alive. But people took this picture and said, like, that's how refugees behave, right? And they attributed it to Syrians today. So there's this confirmation bias. Second is cognitive dissonance. We all want to be smart and nice people. Everybody. Like, we don't want to be stupid and we don't want to be evil. But when we come to a point where we might see that a certain opinion that we have was wrong, or that a certain behavior that we have was wrong, that brings us into an uncomfortable situation because it makes us confront our own stupidity or own evilness. And we don't like this. And that's called cognitive dissonance. So we feel this like, it's an uncomfortable feeling. What do people do to deal with this feeling? They evade change. So we have been wrong in the past. Admitting it now would feel uncomfortable, so we don't admit. We go to neglect. There's also lots of stories that see how that works. It also works when you're oppressed, when you're the victim of a situation. It's called the Stockholm Syndrome. So you're oppressed, you could do something to change the situation, but you don't, because if you would change it, you would admit that you could have changed it a year ago and that all your suffering maybe was meaningless. I think that's maybe the truth behind agency in consulting life, right? Then we have social network bias and the filter bubble effect. So you're digital people. Social network bias also works without online media. We are connected to people that we like, that are similar to us in age. Like most of the people you know and you interact with on a daily basis, they're probably young, they're urban, they're relatively well educated, right? They know the difference between retro and vintage. And these people, they'll have certain opinions, and you'll be influenced by these opinions all day, and you'll not hear the difference. Sometimes we have a clash between the networks, right? So when you look at the protests in Freital and Heidenau, these are people, they're older, they're rural, they're not well educated, and they don't know the difference between retro and vintage, right? They're very, very distant from us, and you'll almost never meet these people. So we are in these networks, and especially online, we have the filter bubbles. There's algorithms that are designed to feed us with things that we like. That's behind the Facebook news feed, that's everything, whereas online, where's some filtering. People that we know, they click on things, we can hide what we don't like. So when was the last time that you've seen a serious argument online that really went against what you believe? And not filtered by Jan Böhmermann or The Daily Show, right? So normally when you see things online, either they're ironic or they confirm what you want. And the stronger the filter bubble gets, the more difficult this becomes. The last one is loss aversion. We know what we have, and we like what we have. And if we would change our perspective, or if we would change our world, we would get something else, but we don't know yet what we'll get. The classic argument is that people do a psychological test and it's completely meaningless, and then they get to choose between two rewards. One is a hat and the other is a mug, right? So it's complete random. Then you can manipulate this test and you can give people the mug and say, here, this is your reward. And then after 5 minutes, you come and say, look, you can choose between the mug and the hat. And then people will always stick to the mug or to the hat, whatever you gave them. Like what people have, they cherish. What they could get, they devalue. So we know what we have. Lieber den Spatz in der Hand als die Taube auf dem Dach. That's the German saying. And we are afraid to lose what we have, but we don't know what we could get. One small example, which I really like, it's mobility. So talking about urban things, I think we're on a broad scale, we are stuck thinking about mobility. If you look at the roads in Germany today, they're very much the same as they were 10 or 20 years ago. In other cities, this has changed a lot. We could have a much better transport system if we would admit that our city was not made to be rebuilt as a parking lot and a racetrack, right? Like our streets, our public life, where we're supposed to sit and talk and meet people and eat and discuss, they're a mixture between a racetrack and a parking lot. So we're stuck. Bikes are nice, they're beautiful, they're fast, they make you healthy, they're affordable. There's so many good arguments. Still, you see these people sitting behind their cars in traffic jams, searching for parking spaces, and they're really, really convinced that parking is necessary and that cars are necessary and that we cannot change this. I think everything that the mechanisms, they're very clearly visible. We have people that hang around with people that like cars. We have people that remember this instance like 4 years ago where they had to use a car for life-saving reasons to get to the hospital, and it's absolutely impossible to live without a car because remember 4 years ago something would have died if we wouldn't have had a car. So they take like this search for the things that confirm where you have to use a car, and they don't remember like the 300 days where you can completely go by in sunshine and ride your bike. People love free parking, and they lack imagination what you could do instead of free parking, right? So we know there's a car and I can send my car there. Like if you close your eyes for a second, you would imagine 1,000 good things that you could do on a parking lot that are much more beautiful, much more meaningful than parking. Still, people have this like, this is my parking space, I don't want to lose it, and I can't really think about something else. Car people hang around. They complain about ruthless bicyclists that run red traffic lights, and they're so angry, and they always feel right, and they may not be. So you have all these discussions how bad bicyclists are, and people are very convinced that they're right. Discussing about cars and bikes is mostly meaningless. People love to do it online, but I think it's meaningless because it's people that are already convinced talking to each other, or it's people fighting each other, but there's no real persuasion happening based on reason. So how can we change this? How can we persuade people when they don't want to be persuaded, when they actively, in their whole mental setup and in their social life, resist persuasion? When they don't want to be persuaded. And it's not only on cars, that's my example, but it's also on a lot of other issues. How are we on time? Oh, okay. Because I have, before I come to persuasion, so that's the cliffhanger, I would like you to take 2 minutes to discuss with your neighbor or your neighbors something where you feel we're stuck, and where you would like to persuade people. Okay, so I can have some water, and please take 2-3 minutes to discuss with your neighbors where you feel we are stuck and where we need persuasion. Okay, so I think you had good discussions. At least it sounded like good discussions. I love this interactive open formats because there's always like a 2-second gap where everybody's like, oh, will this work? And then it always works. So I thought about how can we persuade people if we take serious what we had before. And the idea that I want to suggest evolves centrally around the topic for the August talk, persuading by action. And I think, and I have to read this because I formulated the sentence, I suggest that we do something that is physically real, it happens in the real world, it's not an argument, that's emotionally and culturally positive. So we don't talk about problems, we talk about solutions. That's possibly a bit crazily ambitious and big, and that is in some way risky, can go wrong, and that's activating. That's inviting people to participate and do something. And I think if we take this formula, we can have things that persuade people even when they're stubbornly resisting persuasion. Because actions speak louder than words. That's an old saying. And I think, to modify it a little bit, actions don't only speak louder, but they're also smarter, more subtle, and less difficult to avoid than arguments. Actions are more convincing. Now I'll start with the example. What we did in September 2013 was the first day of Good Life. It was a massive one-day car-free experiment. There was 25 streets that we closed off for cars. It was 20,000 neighbors. At the beginning, we didn't know how many, but then we dug into the numbers and like it's 20,000 neighbors that we had to inform. It's 800 parking spaces that we had to clear, which means tons of material to distribute that block it. And we had 200 registered activities from people. We had no experience. We had no big money behind the project, no safety net. There was no mandate from the government to do it. There was an okay, you can do it if you want, at your risk. And yeah, I think it conforms to the criteria that I introduced above. It was big. If you cycle through the area, it takes you some minutes just to get, if you go full speed from one end to the other. So it was real because we really closed off streets. We really cleared parking spaces. We didn't talk about it or just suggested it. It was positive because starting the whole experiment, we talked a lot about what you could do. And we asked neighbors and associations and small companies to come up with ideas what you can do in these places. It was activating because we didn't do a lot ourselves. We almost did nothing. Like we had like one small booth that was maybe this size and then 2 tables next to it, and that was our own activities on this day. But so we left the free space for people to participate and do their own thing. It was ambitious. On that scale, it had never been done in Germany. It was risky because if you run a workshop, you have everything under control. If you run a thing with 20,000 neighbors, you don't have control. Like, you don't know how many people will come. You don't know whether it will rain or not, whether somebody will freak out, whether there will be an accident. It's risky. It could just fail in being boring. Nobody there, everybody looking around, nobody knowing what to do. And it was big because it affected a lot of people, a large area. That's what we did. And then we stood there, 9 a.m. in the morning. You now have an emotional relation to morning because you came here. Everything quiet, no cars. The official people that have towed away the cars gone. And we didn't know what would happen. I didn't know. Like, I slept the night before and I thought, there's not going to be a lot of people. There's going to be all of these associations and they do something and like there's some people running around. Will this work? And then the day started and people came. So the very first was kids. And kids are easy to persuade because they're maybe not, you have children maybe, then you're probably convinced that kids are very difficult to convince of certain things, like brushing their teeth or something. But kids have not internalized so many things. So kids came out on the streets and they were looking around and like, can I walk here and run? And parents were like, yeah, go, go, go. This is the Car Free Sunday. So kids were running around cheering, like, yeah, this is cool. Like, we like it. Like, we are out of supervision. We can run around all day. Nobody's going to hurt us. It's all going to be nice. Then came dogs and people going to the bakery. So the first people that we reached, we didn't reach them because they said, I want to be informed about a Car Free Sunday. I want to talk about bicycles. The first people we reached because they wanted to go to the bakery and because their dogs had to go out and pee. So I'll come to later how this relates to the barriers to persuasion, but these were the first people that actually came. And then over the course of the day, there was 100,000 people. It was much more than I or anybody else, I think, expected. It was also much more than we had claimed in the registration to the authorities, where we had a much lower numbers of visitors, and we had also planned for a much lower number of visitors. People came, people walked around. We had a full day of sunshine, which was luck. But people were very emotionally changed after the event. Like, we had people that said, like, I've been living in the city for 60 years. This was the most beautiful day of my life. We have people that said, I walked down that street for 10 years, and I was afraid of the people in that bar because they're kind of rough, they're drunk at 3 in the afternoon, which I'm only during Carnival. I don't understand them, like they have very different lives, like we never talked. Now they visit each other's on their birthday. We had people that said, yeah, this whole leftist anti-car thing, we didn't know what to do with it, but it was really beautiful. We walked around and kind of we just looked and felt, and we became quiet and peaceful. And we don't even know why, but somehow this has strung a chord in us. So how does persuasion work with such a project? First, confirmation bias. If you do something that's really big, it's difficult to avoid. People just run into it randomly. People open the newspaper and it's there, right? People are drawn to risky things, even if they don't like it. People may have come to see you fail, right? They say like, I love cars, and they do a car-free Sunday, and it's very big, they're gonna fail, I'm gonna go there and laugh. So you can attract a lot of people that you would normally not reach if you do something that's very big and risky. Second, I've changed the order. Second, cognitive dissonance. It's activating. Everybody participates. There's 100,000 people, they're visitors, but they're also participating in some way. They're looking, they're talking to each other, they all become part of the experience. They may buy something, they may sit somewhere, talk to their neighbors. So before, they were defending their view on life and public streets and what should be there and cars are good, etc. Now they've participated, so we have a counter-cognitive dissonance. So now they come and it's like, oh, I really enjoyed the day, but I shouldn't have. So why have I? I have participated, it felt good. I don't like bikes, I like cars. There were no cars, I liked it. So people you break this barrier, right? People start defending why they liked the car-free Sunday. They start defending it to themselves, they start defending it to other people. So they get a little bit out of the cognitive dissonance mode. Maybe driving a car is not part of my DNA. And they've experienced for one day what else could be there. So next time they walk a parking lot, they'll be like, yeah, yesterday I had a coffee there. Yesterday I had a chat with my neighbors over there. Yesterday there were children playing there. Yesterday I could see the house. Now it's blocked by the car. Yesterday I could see the plants. Now it's blocked by the car. So people get into this alternative mode and they start thinking about what could be. And actually it made people sad after the day, because they have lived through a new reality on the day, and then the day after, they lost it. So we changed the game on loss aversion, and whatever new could come, we are not really interested. People have seen what could come, and they want it. And people have seen that you don't suffer so much when you lose a parking spot. Yeah, and then the network bubble. Because it was so big and so new and activating, like you could talk about what you wanted to do, people talked a lot about it. Also people that normally don't talk about these issues or that they're skeptical. We also made it into the mainstream newspapers. If you do it so big, then you come in Stadtanzeiger, and after 3 years, we also made it into a WDR, the public television. So if you do it really big, you'll affect much more people. You'll change also the social structure. You'll get people into contact with each other that may not have been in contact with each other. You break the filter bubble on Facebook, because it's not only your 10 friends that are liking your rant about something, but people see this beautiful picture of new use of public space, and it spreads, etc. So we break the social network and filter bubble. Yeah, I think that was one experiment that we did on an issue where we feel we're really stuck, and where over time something infiltrates people and they change their perspective.